Eli 5. How did Japan rebuild cities on land which was decimated by atomic bombs? Wouldn't the radiation keep people away for thousands of years? Most intensely radioactive things decay pretty quickly. With an air burst, you get a lot less fallout. So the area was down to background pretty quickly actually. I've been to the Trinity test site in New Mexico, and while it is measurably radioactive, it isn't that radioactive and no big deal if you aren't eating the dirt. Trinity was a ground burst. The green glass there was melted sand and held a lot more of the radioactivity. I don't see anyone answering the original question though. How did Japan clean up and rebuild after Hiroshima and Nagasaki specifically? If you imagine an atomic bomb in terms of sand, the bomb being detonated is similar to dropping a handful of sand in front of a desk fan. It's not a lot and it blows away pretty quickly. It disperses pretty easy. A nuclear power plant melting down is more like putting a 50-pound bag of sand in front of the fan. That's not going anywhere, for a long time. To this day, some of Chernobyl is still actively reacting. They sweep the dust that falls from the explosion away and then start building. It's the dust that's really bad. They didn't know about it, built anyway, found out what radiation poisoning was over time as people would get sick. The radiation wasn't as bad as something today. Those were atomic bombs, like a single action chain reaction explosive. Today's nuclear bombs are double action, more boom boom, with a yield 3,000 times bigger. Which would produce the kind of fallout you're imagining. Been to the museums at both Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they have how the radiation affected generations of people who stayed and lived there documented very well. The radioactive material used in an atomic bomb is largely burned up to fuel the reaction. Most of the radiation that remains is only really deadly for a short while. The background radiation at both locations is no higher than anywhere else at this point. Despite the devastation caused by the atomic bombs, Japan was able to rebuild its cities by taking measures to minimize exposure to radiation. First, they removed the radioactive debris and built temporary housing for the displaced people. Additionally, they monitored radiation levels and restricted access to areas with high levels of radiation. Over time, the radioactive elements decayed and the radiation levels decreased. Through careful planning and hard work, Japan was able to rebuild its cities on the land that was once decimated by the atomic bombs. I had this same question once and basically people said because they detonated it mid-air the radiation didn't get too deep into the ground. That's not to say people didn't suffer from it though. The survivors had illnesses that lasted generations, with babies being born with deformities etc. You can't possibly explain this to a 5-year-old. All of the answers here are geared towards adults. Here's what I would tell an actual 5-year-old. Because the Japanese people have a small supply of land where people can live. They didn't have a choice but to clear out the debris and rebuild. That's an answer for a 5-year-old. We were in Hiroshima 3 days ago on a tour. Weird that the ground zero area has memorials and a museum and the rest of the city is like any modern city. I asked our driver where all the old growth big trees and he just stared at me. Radiation doesn't make land unusable, and the levels aren't high enough to cause major issues. I heard it explained recently that the bulk of radioactive particles get expelled into space. For ICBM anyway. There was barely any radiation. Besides, Japan didn't build jack there. It was all American resources and funding. We rebuilt Japan after winning the war they started. Because there wasn't any fallout and people literally never left the city. Nukes are a fake fear tactic. Genuine question, somewhat related: were the atomic bombs completely necessary? I understand Japan's GovT was doing some fucked up shit. It just seems that killing thousands of innocent people is really fucked up as well. Not saying the US is a saint of a country, but I feel like we could have done something different. But what do I know? I live in a bumfuck town in the south with a degree in the arts that is completely useless lol. Makes you wonder, eh?